When I was a kid, my father told me many stories from Greek mythology. The one that always stuck out to me the most was that of Icarus. The story of Icarus, summarized very briefly, is that he and his father, the master craftsman Daedalus, were imprisoned by the king of Crete. Daedalus, the genius that he was able to build him and his son pairs of wings made from molted feathers and wax, which they could use to fly away from the island and make their escape. Before they took off, Daedalus warned Icarus not to fly too high, because the sun would melt the wax and he would fall into the sea. Icarus, overcome with ecstasy as he soared above the world, ignored his father's instructions and flew ever higher, until the sun melted the wax and his wings fell apart. He plummeted into the sea and drowned, to his father's despair. The story is a cautionary tale of hubris, warning against overconfidence and excessive ambition. A fair warning indeed. Such attributes have undone many men, especially in ancient Greek times. Ironically, as the story involves both Athens and Sicily, one such historical example is that of the Sicilian expedition, an ill-fated military excursion Athens made to Sicily during the height of the Peloponnesian Wars. The campaign, fought far away from the primary theater of the war, was a reach too far and ended in utter disaster, and is seen by many as the nail in the coffin for Athens in the war, unable to recover the manpower lost. Regardless, back to Icarus. While we are supposed to learn from his mistake, I could not help as a kid have some admiration for him, and perhaps, latently, envy. I have since remained fascinated with people and characters like Icarus. Is Icarian an adjective the way Herculean is? Anyway, those who strive for the impossible and are destroyed by it. One of the few times, and possibly the last time, a book ever made me cry when I was 14 or 15 in reading The Great Gatsby, the scene where he is shot in his pool. I frequently think of Sean Connery's character in The Man Who Would Be King, a common soldier elevated to the status of a god king. His refusal to quit while he was ahead ruined everything, but to even be where he was for just a moment. He, too, physically fell like Icarus, cast into a canyon by his former subjects, an impossibly long way. One must wonder what he and Icarus thought of on their descent. This clip answered my question, and indeed was the genesis for this video.
Icarus laughed as he fell, for he knew that falling meant he had soared.
Putting aside the controversy of Bowden himself, the quote touched me, for he knew that falling meant that he had soared. How many people will ever soar? How many people will ever even leave the ground? Very few. The vast majority of people, metaphorically speaking, would remain prisoners in the tower. And to be fair, most of them more or less belong there. Some are too stupid to realize they are prisoners at all, and others are genuinely content with being imprisoned. But what of those who might be able to fly, who could soar even, but never had the guts to find out? Gripped by apprehension, they let their opportunities slip away and remain on the ledge to wallow in their regret, their what-ifs, and worst of all, their resentment for others who are willing to take the leap of faith. I do not think Jean-Luc Godard and I would agree on many things, but I love this quote of his. He who jumps into the void owes no explanation to those who stand and watch. Those who stand and watch are the tragic heroes of today. The ancient Greeks, if they saw the zeitgeist of our society, would write a myth of the Anti-Icarus, the man who never follows his impulse, who never dares, who never takes a risk, and grows to be a cynical, impotent waste. The free citizen who renders himself a slave because he fears dying in the phalanx. Myths like Icarus arise in the context of the culture they spring from. The Greek world was not lacking in bravery and ambition. They lived in the world of Empedocles, the philosopher who cast himself into a volcano to prove his immortality. Men who believed in themselves so thoroughly were the standard. So it makes sense they would develop a story to curb an excess of self-assurance. That is not our world. We live in a time where cowardice in an action can be masked with rationality or ignored through surrogate activities. Resentment and cope are king. Everyone loves to judge, but fear and loathe being judged. Empedocles would be nothing but a lunatic, a deranged, delusional madman to be laughed at and derided today. But derided by whom? A yeast-like mass of the fat, insecure, and basal, who will never in all the decades of their life really be alive at all? Aristotle would take a look at the average person today and feel quite comfortable in his assertion that some people are natural slaves. But I would say many are not, and have simply been ground into rationalizing and accepting less than they could be. Those are the people I speak of. Flowers who will never know their beauty because they refuse to ever bloom. I am not going to stand on a pedestal and pretend that I am some fearless paragon of daring. I am not. In fact, I am naturally quite shy and cautious. This is precisely why I say I admired Icarus, and perhaps envied him. It would be easy for someone like me to say how foolish he was and feel vindicated in that smugness. But in my heart of hearts, I recognize that as the coping of a coward. My great struggle, especially in the last few years, has been to break from this, to overcome my disposition and unleash the passion and vision that is in my soul. I have few genuine regrets. I believe every mistake has taught me a lesson or otherwise moved me closer to where I need to be. I guess you could say that I believe everything happens for a reason. Even if that is not true, well, I physically cannot change my past, so I might as well embrace where I am now. That being said, one moment burns in my memory, a persistent light that I occasionally see and think, what if? A time I was the anti-Icarus I speak of. I will not get into personal details, but it was a moment where I failed to take the leap. The wings were on my back, the sky was open, the sun above and the sea below. And when I hesitated, a gust of wind behind me, as if fate itself was giving me a nudge. I did not move. In the very instant the opportunity was gone, I knew I made a mistake. Twice later on in life, I attempted to return to that ledge, to find my passage barred both times. But I did learn from this, and indeed have found that hubris that buoyed Icarus. In a very similar case, I did take the leap, and I soared. I too was warned about flying too close to the sun, but the exhilaration was too great, my confidence in my wings too unshakable. My wax melted, and I plunged into the sea. Unlike Icarus, I did not drown. Eventually, I washed ashore, and I would fly again. But I will not lie and say that it was easy. When you hit water from such a great height, it might as well be concrete. I shattered on impact, and certainly felt like I was drowning for a moment thereafter. I recovered, though the trace of a scar remains, and the flight still haunts my dreams. But if I had the choice between that terrible fall or that regret of not having taken the jump, I would choose the fall every single time. I have to remind myself of this duality every time I face a ledge. Sure, I may plummet into the sea, but that will be far preferable than not to soar at all. That is where the anti-Icarus copes. He rationalizes his cowardice as prudence. He will never feel his bones break and his body sink in the icy waters, and he takes consolation in that. But he will never feel the wind in his hair, the sun in his face, the speed and the thrill of it all. He may snicker from the cliffside, yet he will never truly laugh, as only Icarus could. Of course, we should strive to fly and reach our destination. I am not saying it is preferable to crash than to land, but I believe it is preferable to crash than to never fly, in that as a society, we have taken off our wings. We must dare to fly again, even if we fly too high. My journey in this is far from over. Every ledge requires its own leap of faith, and I still fight the chains of my nature that try and pull me back. My hope is that by identifying and breaking these chains for myself, I can help others break their own.